Well, as you can see, we are back in Israel. Me and Christy landed yesterday, and we're up on the hills of Judea trying to connect a few more pieces of the Balagan. It's Purim, and if you can hear the music in the background, that is the schools having their Purim event. Purim is a celebration of the book of Esther, and the whole idea of Iranian leadership saying we want to destroy Israel and Israelis doing, how do you say, special operations in the capital city of Iran, or as it was called back then, Persia, is part of what we're going to be talking today. We'll talk about Esther and the modern day Esther and how she connects. We are going to be talking about the hostages and how that connects to where we are. We're talking about what's going to happen, what's going on with Hamas, what's going on in Syria and Lebanon, what's going on in Yemen, and what's going on in the hearts of the mind of the Israeli people as we speak. This is DaviD TaL. This is a Balagan Connection. Join me as we go through all these different Balaganim. And a quick reminder, we are here connected to a ministry called GIHON Springs. Check the link down below. It's a ministry that actually supports Christian ministries in Israel and supports the IDF. And we'll be talking about that as we go along. Let's start off with what's going on in Gaza. And here's the thing, mostly nothing. We're at the end of one stage of the ceasefire agreement that was kind of reached after President Trump came into office. And his special envoy, Witkoff, has actually trying to put together the second stage of the ceasefire. But a lot of things have changed since we signed the three-stage ceasefire. The main thing that's changed is that the American administration has realized how evil Hamas is. And now we understand that they have to be taken out. Hamas has to be eliminated. And no agreement, no ceasefire, no arrangement can allow the Hamas to stay in power in Gaza. On the ground right now, Israel is pulled out of Gaza. There are still 59 hostages, and we think at least 25 of them are alive in the tunnels in Gaza. And that is a major issue, and Israel's been trying to get as many of the hostages out as we can. The idea is, though, that Hamas is not going to give up his hostages unless it can stand at the end of this and say, we won. And this political situation is that the Trump administration is pushing for some kind of an agreement with the Hamas that makes the Hamas decide to leave Gaza. And the Hamas is saying, we're not going to leave Gaza no matter what. Trump met last week with hostages that came out of the tunnels, and he was appalled about what he heard from them. I mean, you could see him in the press release visibly shaken, and he went online and actually threatened Gaza, or threatened the Hamas in Gaza, saying that you are crazy if you believe that you're going to be able to keep hostages and live to tell the tale. So Trump is saying, return the hostages now, or all hell will break loose. Huge amounts of commentary have been going on what does that mean, all hell will break loose. Basically, what I think makes more sense than anything else, more reasonable than anything else, is Trump is going to say to the Israelis, do what you need to do. Israel has already cut off what they call humanitarian aid, and I would call supply and logistics to the Gaza Strip. No more food is going into the Gaza Strip. No more water is going to go into the Gaza Strip. And there's even talk about cutting off electricity and putting as much pressure on the Hamas in Gaza as possible. Before I forget, let's make this something very, very clear. No war in history has any combatant supplied the logistic needs of the enemy population. We didn't do that in Iraq. We didn't do that in World War II. We didn't do that in Japan. In no other war have we supplied the humanitarian aid and the supplies for the population as we were in war. Make another thing clear. One of the things that we, and I think the rest of the world understood, during this hostage release dynamics is how evil the Hamas actually is. And I think the world has seen, I don't know if you remember the whole ceremonies of the release of the hostages and the whole evil, medieval craziness of the Bebus babies coming in coffins that they lock so we wouldn't be able to unlock them. That kind of weird, sicko, wacko ideal. The world is realizing what we're dealing with, and that the population in Gaza is not innocent. They're not innocent citizens. They're not innocent civilians. They're a part of all of this. They've voted for the Hamas. They've supported the Hamas. Many of them have been housing, and we're getting the refugee stories, the hostage stories are coming out. Many of them have been housing the hostages in their own homes and humiliating them. And I'm not even going to talk, yes, we should talk about sexual abuse and psychological abuse and medical abuse and making them starve. This is what's coming out. This is how they treat the hostages, and this is not the Hamas organization. This is regular people in their houses with their kids sitting next to them. We're realizing that this is a different kind of war. So the world has actually, I think, agreed that either we reach some kind of an agreement with Hamas, and Hamas needs to leave, that's what the president has said, or we're going to have to go back in and finish off Hamas. Israel has amassed major amounts of military force on the borders of Hamas. And this time we're talking about, and again, I talked to some of the guys in the army yesterday. This time we're talking about going in with full force, clearing out the population if they want to get out of the battle zones, and completely going in and combing the whole Gaza Strip to make sure that Hamas is not left. Israel's on the verge of doing that, but there's still some kind of negotiation, some kind of, okay, let's try one more thing before that happens. And that's the situation right now. The big mega deal that President Trump has been talking about, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, the big mega deal is on hold right now while all of this comes down. So that's the situation on the ground right now. Witkoff is right now in the Middle East, moving back and forth, trying to get a few more of the hostages out in return for a continued ceasefire. Basically saying to the Hamas, we will give you no war if you return some of the hostages, but if you return at least part of the hostages, we realize that we're not going to get them all. And I think there's a growing realization in Israel, which is a part of the problem, that the Hamas will never release all of the hostages. There's no initiative, there's no reason for them to release all the hostages. And that's the situation right now in Gaza. In the meantime, things are changing on the northern border. Israel went into Syria and bombed Syrian assets that are fighting against Syrian minorities. In a nutshell, Syria is a country that was created after World War I out of different nationalities, Sunni, Shiite, Druze, which is a Mormon version of Islam or Islamic version of Mormons, Alawites, which is another version of that. And all of these have been fighting for years. And the only way to hold together a very diverse country like Syria, by the way, Lebanon is the same way, is by power, dictatorships. Now the dictatorship has changed. And it turns out that the Druze are being massacred by the Syrian main government in the south. And the Alawites, who were the minority that had ruled Syria, Hafez al-Assad, the president of Syria, was part of the Alawite minority. The Alawites are being massacred in their thousands in the northern part of Syria. By the way, not only Alawites, also Christians. So minorities are being massacred. They're being made to crawl like dogs on the ground before they're being shot. The women are being made to run naked through the streets before being killed. That is happening in Syria. And here's what I, as an Israeli, don't understand. If that's happening, why is the world silent? Why are there no demonstrations in Columbia University? Why are there no demonstrations in the streets of London about what's going on in Syria? And the only reason is, it's not Jews. It's not connected to Israel. We are the apple of God's eye. And when it doesn't connect to the apple of God's eye, nobody cares. That's why we carry this role on us. The Jews have asked Israel to help. secure them. And Israel has extended a security blanket over the Druze population in Syria. And basically there's talk about making some kind of Druze autonomy on the southern part of Israel between us and Damascus. The Alawites, on the other hand, who are being slaughtered by the Sunnis, have asked Israel to help. And because the Alawite area is where the Russians used to have their bases, there's talk about some kind of an arrangement between Israel, Russians, Alawite, in order to defend the Alawites in the northern part of Syria. The irony of this is the Alawites hated Israel more than anybody else. The Hafez al-Assad regime did terrible things to the Israelis, including, and I hope Jacqueline is watching this, including an Israeli spy / operative who managed to wheel his way into the top of the administration in Damascus, who was tortured and killed terribly, named Eli Cohen. And we've been asking for his remains back, and the Alawite government has never allowed us to get his remains back. And you get a little bit of an understanding that we are not great lovers of the Alawites, but here's the irony. Now they're asking for us to save them. And we're seeing a growing understanding in the Middle East that Israel has become a power player, a power broker in the Middle East. Iran is down. Turkey is not yet in. And for reasons, not that we want to, but for reasons that we have no choice, Israel has become a major player in the whole Middle East situation. So that's a situation in Turkey, in Syria. Israel has been bombing and threatening to bomb the government assets in Syria if they threaten the Druze on the southern part or any Israeli assets. In the meantime, in Lebanon, again, another country that's come together mostly of different diverse, in Lebanon, the Hezbollah, who had been taking up the area in southern Lebanon and was running Lebanon, are completely dismantled, or almost completely dismantled. I got to be careful about this. So along the border with Lebanon and Israel, okay, there's Israeli outposts, and Israel is saying, if you want us to leave the southern border of Israel, the places in Lebanon that overlook Israeli communities that have been bombed, you have to put something in place that will be, I'm not going to say preferable, but will not be a threat to Israel. And the agreement between us and Lebanon from 2016 was, 2006, was to allow the Lebanese army, not the Hezbollah, into the positions in southern Lebanon. We are in the process of that. And last week, 2 Israeli positions in southern Lebanon were turned over to the Lebanese army. And hopefully that will create the buffer, together with the support of the United States, together with allowing the Lebanese to open up their oil resources offshore, okay? All of this together will bring some kind of peace and tranquility. The couple that is living in my apartment, literally right over there behind the tall buildings right over there, who had left the border with Lebanon and moved down to Modi'in because it was dangerous, have decided that in 2 months they are willing to move back up to there. There's a whole discussion about that. But as we see, the northern border is quieting down unless something very different happens. In the meantime, Israel is very strategically and very surgically going into different parts of the West Bank, as in Judea and Samaria. We are now, we are now in Judea. And facing me are the hills of Jerusalem. Literally, you can see the hills, the outskirts of Jerusalem, about half an hour drive away. And Israel is going into different parts in Judea and Samaria and clearing out the militant, jihadi, Hamas, elements inside parts of the West Bank that are not under the Palestinian Authority control. So we're fighting in Syria, we're fighting or dealing with Lebanon, we're dealing with the West Bank, and we're dealing with Gaza at the same time. And just to make the balagan more interesting, the Houthis have decided, remember the Houthis down in Yemen, that if Israel doesn't allow supply into the Gaza Strip, they will be closing off shipping on the Red Sea. They haven't threatened to fire rockets at Israel yet. But again, it's not like they're a threat, but they're a pinprick. There's something that Israel's going to have to deal with. So that is the, I'm going to say, security or the Middle East broad picture. Which brings me to Purim. And let's tie something down here that I think is kind of amazing. And again, the way the Balagan connection brings these things together, I think, is fascinating. Purim is when we dress up. By the way, it's our version of Halloween, though without the evil witches, ghosts, macabre, evil stuff. So it's all fun, and a lot of girls will dress up. Little girls will dress up as Queen Esther. Boys will dress up now as soldiers or as policemen, and a lot of little girls will dress up as Wonder Woman. Now, why Wonder Woman? Because the actress who played Wonder Woman in the franchise, in the Marvel franchise, is a young Israeli named Gal Gadot. And most of you probably have heard the name. Gal Gadot played Wonder Woman. She played in a couple other movies. It's very interesting. By the way, Israel's small enough that I actually know Gal Gadot. Well, I don't know her personally. I met her a couple of times because she was visiting hospitals where there were sick kids. And I was with a sick nephew once in a hospital, or a couple of times in a hospital where she came to visit. But here's the thing about Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot, together with the rest of the Israelis and the Jews in the Hollywood establishment during this whole war in Israel, hasn't been anti-Israel as opposed to some of them, but hasn't said or hasn't come out very strong in support of Israel. They tried to cancel her in the beginning. They couldn't cancel her because she's an, an A-level celebrity. But they tried to cancel her because she did serve in the Israeli army and again, in genocide and baby killers and everything, but it didn't really work. Now, how this all comes together is that the Disney Corporation, who bought the rights to all kinds of things, the Star Wars universe as included, actually decided to do a live-action remake of Snow White. And they cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, even though she's I'm going to say a DEI hire, for lack of a better word, because they cast a Colombian non-white actress to play the role of Snow White. And weirdly, they put Gal Gadot in the role of the evil witch. First of all, weird, because anybody who sees Rachel Zegler next to Gal Gadot will not believe that the evil witch is jealous of the beauty of Snow White, because the evil witch is so much more beautiful. Gal Gadot is one of the most beautiful women in the world, and I see if I can find a picture of them from the Oscars, okay, standing next to each other, you'll see what I mean. But Rachel Zegler, being a woke Hollywood actress who is a DEI hire, actually got into the whole Israel-Palestine issue. And even though she's actually co-starring in the movie next to Gal Gadot, said terrible things about Israel. Free Palestine, from the river to the sea. She was anti-Trump. She was, and all of that. All of that comes together. So you've got Gal Gadot, the Israeli, you've got Rachel Zegler, and here's the thing. And I want to bring a couple of minutes of the recording because Gal has realized that she can't hide from who she is. And I want you to listen to a few minutes, and I'm going to bring up this clip, a few minutes of what she said after the Oscars, okay, to a group of Jewish, in a Jewish event. And let's make this very clear. Okay, so here is Gal Gadot. Let's take a few minutes of this and continue.
My name is Gal. I'm a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, an actress. I'm Israeli, and I'm Jewish. I'm gonna say it again. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. Isn't it crazy that just saying that, just expressing such a simple fact about who I am, feels like a controversial statement? But sadly, this is where we're at today. I grew up in Rosh Hashanah, in the center of Israel. My mother was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. Her father, my grandfather, Avraham Weiss, may he rest in peace, was born in what was then Czechoslovakia. He was the only one in his family who survived. His father died fighting for the Czech army when the Nazis invaded, and his mother and brother were murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. He came to Israel with nothing and built a life for himself. And despite the horrors he endured, he always taught me the values of love, compassion, and tolerance. את לא משיגה שום דבר בכעס ובשנאה. You don't win anything with anger and hate, he used to tell me. Thank you. On my father's side, I'm the 8th generation to be born in the land of Israel. One of my ancestors was the very first chemist in the Shearei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem. I'm very proud of both sides of my family, and they show the two sides of Israel. On the one hand, a country that provided a life raft for refugees fleeing the horrors of persecution, pogroms, and the Holocaust. And on the other hand, the historic homeland of the Jewish people, where our roots run deep and where we are an indigenous people.
I can't help but make the connection. Back then, Persia, Iran was the empire. And it was a beautiful Jewish woman whose job was to step in on the main stage of the Persian Empire and stand up for the Jewish people. Stand up for the Jewish people. And even though she wasn't there because she was Jewish, when she's there at the top of the top, I mean, these are the women who are at the top of their careers, at the top of their importance. I mean, Esther was in the court of the king of Persia, the emperor of Persia, Gadot. Gadot, at the top of her form in Hollywood, all of a sudden realized that they can't get away from who they are. All of a sudden realized that God put them in this place for such a time as this. That is what I think is fascinating. Esther in the ancient times, in the ancient empire, and on the biggest stage in the world back then, Gal Gadot in the modern times, the modern empire, on the biggest stage in the world, and Gal Gadot starts off with this. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. And I want to leave you with this. And again, this is something that more and more of us are starting to understand. My name is David, and I'm Jewish. I'm a father, I'm a soldier, I'm a born-again Christian, I'm everything. But my name is David, and I am part of the Jewish people. I'm part of the Jewish story. I'm part of the Jewish promise. Amazingly, I've managed to connect that promise to Jesus Christ. Amazingly, the Jewish people have survived all this time, and the last stage that they have to overcome, the last problem they have to overcome, the last issue that will make them the upgraded Jews that we want to be, is the connection to Jesus. Gal is not a Christian, but she's connected to her Jewish heritage. I'm a Christian, but I'm still connected to my Jewish heritage, and we're all connected to the Jewish story. That was Esther, now it's Hollywood. And I think that is an amazing Balagan connection to talk about today. In the meantime, me and Christy are here. I'm going to be starting a tour in a week. Actually, a tour. People have actually come back to Israel to tour Israel. And by the way, look at how beautiful it is. I mean, you can understand that. And we will also be doing work for GIHON Springs. GIHON Springs, the ministry that was created by Jeff and Karen Johnson, Calvary Chapel Downey, to support Christian organizations and Christian ministries in Israel and to support the IDF. One of the things that me and Chrissy are going to be doing is going from place to place, finding more places where this support can be used. So if you want to be a part of that and you want your support to go to Israel, not through an organization, not through a big office, but to the people on the ground, through me and through Christy directly, connect to GIHON Springs down here. I'm going to see if I can put up a QR code and give you a second and just put your camera up to the QR code literally in front of the screen here and click on that. You'll go to the GIHON Springs webpage. If you want to support the work that GIHON Springs is doing, there's different things. We've got Netiva, we've got a pro-life ministry. If you want to support me and Christy, that would be probably the best way to do that. And if you want to support Israel, GIHON Springs is the best way to support Israel literally on the ground. This is DaviD TaL. This is the Balagan Connection. Right now in Modi'in, by the way, this is the hill where the Maccabean revolt started off. We can talk about that later. Right now in Modi'in, on our way up to Jerusalem. Come with us. We'll kind of share the whole experience with you and hope to see you soon.